Greetings, dear ones. This is Friday, October 22nd. I have to keep checking the date because, as time is becoming more fluid and more um, less defined, less linear in many ways, our framework for time can get a little bit out of sync with the actual time. It's strange that I'm even saying that because I happened to see a little comedy blip last night on the state of Arizona, and one of the things that they follow or don't follow is the change of time and the daylight saving time calendar. And it was a news comedy show, so they were actually going into the reasons why time was ever adjusted in this way to begin with, and when, and how it got modified or rolled back and then reinstated. So I'll talk about that another day. Today we are focusing on law and the various levels of law. And it's very, very interesting that this should be the theme for this week's Ancient Future Wisdom episode, because we just went through a very, very powerful full moon on Wednesday, the 20th. And I receive information from my Council of Ancients, but also source what's being viewed from an astrological perspective from several different sources. As you may or may not know, if you've been with me for some time, I have always been very aligned with sidereal astrology, which is the most ancient of the astrologies. Now the current understanding about sidereal astrology is that it is based in a Hindu or Indian model. And my experience for, I don't know what it was, 15, 18 years, really going into it, was that sidereal astrology was that of the ancient alchemists and the ancient cultures, Egypt, ancient Greece, etc., because their perspective was more galactic, on a larger scale, whereas at a later point the Catholic Church had the foremost scientist of the day shift that so that it would read more as the Earth being the center of the universe. So the ancient astrology was based in more myth and the knowledge of the gods and their characteristics. And still to this day, astrology, the tropical astrology, still does, but sidereal was much more based in the mythological and the human equivalent of evolution through the assistance of the gods and the stars. So the astrologers that I currently align with had a slightly different take on what this full moon represented in some ways. It is a full moon in Aries, which always brings forth the warrior energy, and we have influences from Pluto as well as Eris, which is the planet of discord, destruction, chaos, and that's been current for quite some time. It's changed its position, but still very apparent the past month or two. So let's talk a little bit about that warrior energy and the battling and fighting and warrior purpose throughout history, and how that determined law or lack thereof. It's very, very interesting that this week, well, not so much just this week, but it's very in the news more and more, the subversion of law, the distortion of law, the attempt to dismantle law. And this has, laws and democracy and a structure that protects and creates a place for freedom of its people is a major threat to the old world order of dictators and tyrants and autocrats and kings and emperors and popes who had great power, and it was their word that was law. And people had no protections. They had no guarantee of any freedom whatsoever. And laws and a structure, a democratic structure based in law for and on behalf of the people, with the participation of the people, is literally what counteracts the possibility of us reverting back to those forms of pyramidal structure that we have been exploring as a species for now a couple 100,000 years. This evolutionary leap is about moving from that structure to a completely different social structure. A new social structure is what we're in the process of developing and creating. But if our means of fighting injustice and changing the social order that does tend to discriminate and cause harm and oppress those most vulnerable and those that are grouped based on race, gender, religion, etc., as being worthless or not having a voice and having no power, then this perspective undermines the entire possibility of evolution of this species. So, very much in the news, the Supreme Court. Many have written opinions about what's going on with our court system, and in particular Supreme Court. That one article I saw was the Supreme Court is running off the rails, or has run off the rails. And another that this current court or current set of judges is following one man's perspective and one man's idea of law. And that particular article was referring to Supreme Court Justice, good Lord, Clarence Thomas, and who went in saying that he is rigidly going to stick to what he perceives as law and what his perception of what laws should stay in place and what laws should be changed, and that he wasn't going to change at all. And that's a refusal to evolve, first of all. And second of all, that um, our highest court in the land that was created to have differing opinions and to look at all perspectives of a law that, or of a case that had reached that level of law, so that there would be more of a democratic decision making on that law, on its change or on its implementation or on its modification. And anyone who is interested in law or connected to law and has been watching the litigiousness, meaning that their lawsuits are now out of control, have seen what this has done to our court system. And certainly, personally, I come across this all the time in different service oriented or retail or even entertainment industries, where something is not offered any longer, or they're limiting your way to do things. Even, talking about, I don't know, carnivals and rides, and everything is restricted now out of fear of lawsuit. And we are the ones that have created that through our own greed, through our own mistakenly placed blame, rather than really looking at the situation and how much responsibility we had. Everything from, I like a really hot cup of tea or coffee, and I can't get that because one woman sued a company after dumping the coffee or tea or whatever it was in her lap. I went this week to Best Buy to resolve something with my computer, and one of the things was my external drive was not automatically copying, and even when I requested it to do so, it wasn't. And it wasn't until after long, searching with one of the techs. Actually, he was a manager. This and all other external hard drives that I use for backup, the app that will allow for that automatic backup to take place on your computer has been eliminated across the board, not only with this company, which happens to be the largest creating external backups or external hard drives, but all others, because of the lawsuits regarding loss of information on people's personal computers. Now, how much of that was the responsibility of the external hard drive program or app? How much of that was the personal misuse or accidental or not understanding? I don't know for sure. But I do know that now, my life has added more time, more minutes, more effort because of what very well might be frivolous lawsuits. And that brings me to what I've mentioned before in other episodes. It are the SLAPP lawsuits, or the SLAPP suits, SLAPP. And that's an acronym for Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation. And we're seeing that right and left. That anyone criticizes a company or criticizes an individual, and immediately they are sued for millions of dollars. Most often, well, almost in every single case, the purpose is not to actually obtain those funds and obtain justice, but simply to tie the company or individual or newspaper or what have you up in court and literally run them out of money. And moreover, to create and instill fear, and it's a scare tactic. It's really the tactic of bullies, or it's bullying. There have been many cases. If you're familiar at all with the comedian John Oliver, he did a piece about a year ago, one of his episodes, on these type of lawsuits, in particular focusing on a man who owns one of the largest, or he does own the largest privately owned coal mine in the country, and had been sued for dangerous practices for his, actually, in a case where a mine collapsed and 9 people died as a result of shoddy protections for workers. There's been several others. The government, the federal government's OSHA protections are laws that protect workers in all different settings. Certainly became involved in an investigation in another area and found him to be endangering wheat workers. And when a newspaper wrote about this, he sued them for libel. He has sued cartoonists. He has sued a group of very, very peaceful, very, very respective protesters outside of his company. And the newspaper, the very small local newspaper, who reported on the protest and what they were protesting, again, protection for workers. And this tied these people up in courts for years and years and years, and it cost this little newspaper hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's its purpose, to shut people up, to scare them into not speaking, whether it's newspapers or individual reporters or communities. And the amount of slap lawsuits in our court system right now is mind-boggling. And as horrible as that is, and how destructive it is to our court system, particularly because many judges are appointed, not elected, in many levels and in many states. So therefore, a partisan or politically inclined governor can place or appoint, or other official can appoint a judge that they know will be sympathetic to corporations, for example, or to their lawsuits. And there's laws protecting someone who works for a company, an attorney that works for a company, to then step into public office, or vice versa. I'm sorry, just into public office. And now they're fighting for the corporations while in government offices or government positions. Where does this play into what is going on astrologically? This full moon is not only about the warrior evolving, but also about justice, and justice for the most vulnerable. And how do we individually hold that justice and hold people accountable for injustices. And moreover, where are we being unjust or not able to speak up because of fear for those that either are in most need or most vulnerable, or even in our own circles, our own workplace, our own communities, our own family, friend circle as well. I was at a women's forum this week. The first time the first time they've presented again since COVID. And it was a fantastic panel of very, very powerful, very professional, high-level professional women. And normally there's a theme, and they're discussing a particular area of business or what have you. And this year, or at this point, it was kind of a discussion of what, how did you handle COVID? How did you quarantine? How did you feel throughout with all that was going on? And then as the conversation continued regarding the protests and Black Lives Matter and all that was occurring, each in their individual way were asked, how have you felt those injustices in the workplace or in your different positions throughout your career, and when have you spoken up? And beautifully, one of them was a very, very, very high level vice president within TD Bank. Another was the diversity and HR person for Major League Baseball. Another is the head of the South Jersey Chamber of Commerce. The other was the chair for the new Cannabis Regulatory Commission, who worked very, very closely prior to that within the governor's office. So these are women who are really on the front lines making changes. And what they shared in the moments when they decided to speak up, and the resultant not only relief but recognition and support and gratitude from those that were in the same department or the same meeting or the same situation, and did not feel like they could speak up or didn't out of fear. So across the board, this scare tactics, whether you're going to lose your job, whether you're going to be seen particularly as a woman, as labeled as too emotional or what have you, we're all in a moment of decision for ourselves. And are we going to step into this level of responsibility for what is going on in our society, in our world, regarding social injustice, regarding climate change, and the injustice to the ecological injustice. Again, another talk earlier this year, I mentioned the change, or not the implementation, please soon the implementation, but the actual writing of ecocide laws in the international court. And while it is now on the books, just as genocide and other horrific destructive deathing practices are on the books, so too in future it can be litigated. So this is a great deal, but how can you individually, where does your sense of injustice play out through your life? knowing that a certain product or a certain company is sourcing from sweatshops in and taking advantage of overworking their female or child workers, or China with the Uyghurs, which is almost slave labor at that point. Actually, and the horrific things that are occurring. At what point do you use the power that you have with your dollar to be able to speak up? At what point do you say, that woman should not be passed over for a promotion simply because you feel she has childcare challenges? At what point do you stop? Again, another report this week, strikes. They're jokingly referring to this as Striketober, because there's so many workers striking after the Great Resignation. People are not wanting to go back to positions and companies where they are not recognized or paid, or the conditions are horrific. Kellogg's workers are on strike, and they are striking because they can be required to work a 16-hour workday. At the last minute, they can be told, you have to take up this next shift. And whether you have children that need to be picked up from school, whether you have an elder parent that needs to go to a doctor, it doesn't make any difference. If you do not, your job is in jeopardy. This is horrific in this day and age. And other workers are striking because the company, John Deere, for example, that company has made, $62 billion during COVID. It's almost $62 billion during COVID. And their CEO's salary has increased 160%. Whereas the workers are barely making it. They are actually attempting to remove the pensions of their workers. It sounds archaic. It sounds like I'm talking about decades ago or 100 years ago, but this is currently happening. When I was growing up in Northern California, San Francisco, the Bay Area, we belonged to, first of all, it was the most wonderful teaching process of how our government works and how it can be, how we can participate and utilize that process to make things better or stop things that were causing harm. At very young age, 13 years old, we were going door to door with petitions. It was before I could get super involved. I was involved. I was a participant and an active worker for Cesar Chavez. We marched. I was in peace marches when I was a little kid. My mother drugged me and my brother, and we walked or rode or were carried in peace marches. So this education from a very young age of how our system was designed and how it can work. One of the things that we did implement in California, because I had a brother who was paraplegic in a wheelchair, there were no adaptations for buildings, sidewalks, etc. for the handicapped. We lifted his wheelchair everywhere, up huge staircases, just going out for a walk over curbs, everything. We had to carry our own piece of plywood for a ramp to be able to get him in and out of places. And so we worked very, very hard, making calls, petitions, etc., until there was a law implemented for the handicapped, for ramps in buildings and beginning to make sidewalks accessible. That was the first in the country. And it then moved over the whole land and is very common now, a requirement now, federally. But that's how you make laws as a people. That is what the system was designed to do. And if there is a law or an injustice in some way, we have the power to change it. But that does necessitate changing our own internal laws, our own way of making choices. It is so much easier to just, buy what's convenient or take the shorter route or keep silent. But we're in a process of evolution where we all get to participate. And in this country and any of the other democracies that are hanging on, again, they're being attacked and undermined and dismantled from within, as ours is through this court system. I mean, the court subversion or law subversion. When did you ever hear of someone completely refusing a subpoena? How can would we get away with that? Would we be able to just tell the local municipal court or county court, state court, yeah, no, I'm not going to come? We would be slapped with a contempt immediately and wouldn't have to go through the 50 steps that our Congress is now going through in order to answer a refusal, a subpoena refusal. So it does affect us, not to mention that all of those SLAPP suits that I mentioned earlier, that I spoke of earlier, are taxes. You are paying out of your dollar, out of your paycheck. You are paying for this to occur. At what point do you say, no, I don't want my money going here or here or here? And I am choosing to put my money behind those projects, behind those groups, behind those organizations that are fighting for justice. Maybe I don't have the time, but you do have the time to search within and find out where your greed is perhaps not moving into a lawsuit, but perhaps one of your family members have. Perhaps you do know someone who got away with it. Certainly when I was working as an interpreter and was in countless courts and depositions, more often than not, I would say 99% of the time, the person who was attempting to get justice, their money, had been harmed either through unsafe practices in a company or a righteous lawsuit from a car accident, and the opposing attorney representing the insurance company, of course, was going to try to do everything possible and destroy that person's not only credibility but their ability, and often even their livelihood would be taken away. So again, it comes back to what we are currently being given as an opportunity individually. Astrologically, as I mentioned, we are talking about the warrior. At what point does a warrior shift into a leader? Knights of old, because they had the equipment, because they had the funds, because they had the armor, the swords, etc., were able to do whatever they wanted, rape, pillage, etc., until, however much you look at it as a myth or legend, until the time of Arthur and the Round Table, when there was a code of honor adopted, and because of that, they would then fight on behalf of those that were weak or vulnerable or the most endangered. And so that's what this astrological opportunity is where in us will we fight for justice? Where do we find the courage and the bravery and speak up? It was very interesting, as usual. Those of you who have listened to this before, or listened to me before, know that I have the most amazing and comedic Star Trek guides. And once again, as I'm answering emails, etc., because I know them so well, I put on Star Trek in the background. And last night, Star Trek Next Generation was surrounding the Prime Directive. And those of you who are unfamiliar with the show, the Prime Directive is a non-interference law. For example, if they encounter a planet where where the planet is not up to the technology to have space travel, for example, that it goes against the Prime Directive to contact or interfere in that planet's evolution by introducing or even making themselves known, bringing that whole concept, that whole proof, that whole idea to a planet. There are many, many other reasons for it, but it was fascinating considering all that's been going on this week and what was very up. It was fascinating to see the highest ranking of the officers, along with the captain, having a philosophical debate at which point do we step in, or can we step in, or can we bend the Prime Directive rule. And it's a beautiful discussion and a very thought-provoking discussion. I encourage you to find it and watch it. Let me see if I have jotted down last night the title of that particular episode. Here it is. Prime Directive. No, I did not. But I will attempt to do so and post it here. But it was about at what point do we, there's the whole argument of Afghanistan recently. Do we step in? Do we continue there? This is not just a legal or international court decision. This is a moral decision, and at this point, it is also very much aligned or misaligned with spiritual law. And again, what we're doing in this evolutionary process is literally modifying, evolving, adapting universal spiritual law. Because there are so many parties involved in this project, not just human. And what is being seen in the cosmos through the astrologers and based on ancient knowledge, myth, legend, characteristics that we have picked up not only mythologically and based in ancient beliefs and concepts, but also astronomically, the behavior of the planets, the positioning of them, or other cosmic bodies. Same thing I've spoken about as far as animal teachers are concerned. There is much written about the symbology there throughout history. All cultures have identified or aligned or given certain characteristics, certain aspects of human nature and the circle of life and interchange in between humans and animals. So there's a great deal of symbology, but you need not even have that information. If an animal appears to teach you, whether it's, for example, swan has been very apparent the past about 10 days or 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks, no, about 10 days. And you explore the environment of a swan, the life cycle of a swan. What does their way of being teach you, show you? What are you being given the opportunity to look at within your own being? So right now we have the symbology from astrology, but also it evokes, because we are so interconnected with the cosmos, it interconnects with our own internal evolution. And so the subject matter of fighting to the death simply because you have, battle energy in you or warrior energy in you, where does that evolve, where you become the leader, or you utilize that in a constructive way? Where are you being called on for a stepping up of your courage and bravery to speak out? Where are you taking action to change some of the social injustice in this country or around the world? Where we are moving to a place where outer laws will be less and less necessary, because our internal laws, that which is from our deepest true nature, will be determining how we behave, what actions we take, how we speak. For now, we are still in a childhood of that, and so we need a structure of law to protect and create that freedom. And so please allow yourself to become aware of the distortions, the subversion, the taking advantage of, the taking for granted of, the dismissal of, the I don't want to use the word ignorance to be misunderstood, but just not knowing the law. This country is based on individual participation, individual responsibility, individual choice. And although at times it may not feel like that, it is designed for that possibility, for that potential. And that is the model that evolution, the current evolutionary leap, is adapting into. As I've said so many times, away from that pyramidal structure into a circular structure. So that competitiveness, which I spoke about the other night at the full moon meditation, becomes a way in which we lift each other up and pioneer new and innovative ways of doing things. And so if you can feel, if you are sensitive to energy, you will feel that all that I've mentioned, although it sounds very disruptive and discordant and often even scary. It is a reflection of what is going on in our world, and the planet Eris, who is the goddess of discord and chaos, is instead teaching us how to take those energies and create from them. She is a creator energy as well, or a creator goddess as well, from chaos, from discord. And so I invite you to explore, study, investigate. Law, yes. It touches the very smallest and almost most intimate places of our lives, for good or for ill. It is an opportunity to evolve from this need for outer laws and rules and regulations to an internal law, those that have raised their consciousness, those that have transformed and transmuted so many of these pieces within. It becomes not only unconscionable, but it becomes painful, physically, energetically, emotionally, spiritually painful to break a law or to cause harm by word or deed or even thought. And that is what we're moving into. That is what you have the opportunity to do as an individual. It seems insurmountable, but so too did so many things, as I said, growing up, having farm workers with any rights whatsoever, changing the laws so that my brother could move or be moved around society, around the city. Laws that protect our environment. Laws that protect those that have long preserved a way of democratic decision making. I'm referring to the wisdom keepers, the indigenous around the world. Again, beautifully aligned. I always, on Sunday nights, ask for guidance from Jamie Sam's Sacred Path cards. And this week, I pulled the card of Council Fire, and just want to read a few minutes of, one paragraph. It says, when the course followed by an entire nation depends upon the decisions made at a council fire, great importance is given to those decisions. All conclusions drawn and laws made will rule everyone in the tribe. Any tribal member choosing to refuse a council decision will have to answer to the council. To lose face by refusing any new rule or law can mean expulsion from the tribe or some form of amends making if the offense is small. Most councils of nations are made up of chiefs, clan mothers, elders, historians, medicine people, counselors, and seers. The exceptions are the councils of younger people or council of societies, which combine the wisdom of the elders with the new ideas held by youth. May it be so in our world. In the case of a combined, let me skip down. The decision-making process that guides the path of Native Americans is multifaceted. All sacred viewpoints of those affected by the decisions are treated with respect. If someone has received a vision or medicine dream regarding the wisdom of the final decision, that information is reviewed. The manner in which a situation was handled in the past is taken into consideration. The way in which a probable decision will affect the lives of the people is carefully weighed. The desired outcome is always to keep the peace. If the decision involves two parties at odds with one another, tribal law is consulted to bring a fair judgment. When someone calls a council, that person must have the courage to accept the decisions of that council with grace. There was a council of nations here in the East, very, very famously, took place in New York State, which was not New York State as yet. This was prior to the Revolution. And that structure was known by our founding fathers, and much of what our country's structure was informed by that Council of Nations. It's historic, you can look it up. This is why this is called ancient future wisdom, because we are gathering the ancient wisdom, combining it with future knowledge and abilities to blend and recreate a world that works for everyone, as the phrase goes. And that everyone is not only each and every country and each and every race and each and every religious tradition, each and every gender, of which we have many, but as well each and every animal, bird, fish, insect, plant, tree, cloud, rain, land. And you make a difference. You make a difference every day in your choices. You make a difference in where you put your money. You make a difference in where you speak up. You make a difference in finding out what is going on in your own community, your own country. In this case, in your own court system. You make a difference in the consciousness that you choose to move from. Do you acknowledge that your very thoughts, your very energetic expression can harm or heal? This is evolution. And you are very purposely here to participate, to put your stamp on how this occurs, to bring all that you are into this, and not merely take action, but to transform and transmute yourself so that those internal laws are what determine your life. And what will color and influence and design our new earth, our new way. Feel the energetics that are here. Feel your body. Feel the anchoring in of that evolved warrior within. The depth of your courage and bravery. The healthy way of competitiveness that brings out the best in those involved. Otter medicine has been very present again over the past 10 days or more. And otter medicine is the feminine way of lifting up and sharing and being excited and happy for the success of others and others' children as much as your own. It is in that lifting up that all is lifted. Sit deeply in who you truly are. Use the energies of the planets, their alignments, their oppositions. Use the current events and revelations, uncoverings, as a means to explore your own way of that theme. How it presents in your life, how it presents in you within. Your own emotional, spiritual, landscape. As always, dear ones, it is with the deepest of honor, gratitude, and love for your presence on this planet. Until next time, bye-bye.